Hey everybody, welcome back to the Cow's channel. It's time for another installment of A Cow's Opinion, where we give you our opinion and it doesn't really matter because it's a moot point. I am the Cow, and thank you so much for tuning in. Hey, by the way, a little bit of channel news, we are nearing 150 subscribers. Good on you, because I sure as hell ain't doing this. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, do the dance, and slap someone on the rear. Maybe not that last one, but, you know, with the way YouTube goes, it's probably going to be required at some point. Who knows? Today I want to talk about a pair of Kotaku articles. The last Kotaku article I thought was a cheap shot. This one I like. I think it's really important because it's basically PlayStation is hard to work with. This is by John Walker. So full credit to him for putting in the work. And as you can see, decent amount of comments. So here's the point. After yesterday's industry-wide discussion of the cost of being visible on Sony's PlayStation Store, which we'll get to in a second, Kotaku has heard from multiple independent developers and publishers expressing similar frustrations and fury. So here's the thing. A lot of indie developers are talking to news outlets now because they are covering each other that Sony doesn't really treat them fairly. Now, Sony is, of course, one of the quote-unquote big three. Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo. If you're just a casual tuning in, the reason why we call these three the big three is because they're the ones that make the actual physical consoles. So if you want to play a game, your choices are PlayStation, Xbox, right now Nintendo Switch, or PC. Now, as the consoles become more like mini computers, more and more often you're able to just choose any of those four platforms for whatever you want. The issue and why Sony is hard to work with is what's known as a first-party game. When you make a game, you have two options. You can either make it for a single platform, or you can make it for multiple platforms. I can enunciate, sure. What that means is that if I make a single-party game, or a first-party game, I'm probably a game studio owned by Sony, Nintendo, or Microsoft, but I'm only making the game for one platform. Why would I do this? Well, if I'm owned by those guys, I don't have a choice. They tell me we're going to make a game for us, and we're going to drive people to our hardware. But there are multiple instances. For instance, I think Ratchet and Clank's studio, as well as the guys who made the Uncharted games, they make a lot of cool stuff. Pretty much only release stuff for Sony. They have a great relationship with Sony, and it is easier to only make something that works on one set of hardware. It cuts down on your costs. As well as these companies will sometimes buy your studio or just greatly fund the development of the game. If you have a game that's really popular, but you can, if I want to play Master Chief and Halo, I can only do it on Xbox. Now you can do it on PC too, because Microsoft is really getting into PC gaming, which props to them. But if you drive stuff to your hardware, you don't make money on hardware, but you make lots of money off the software. So if you drive everyone to your hardware, then you make a lot of money later on the software. It's eating a cost. So here they're talking about how it's far harder to work with Sony. So here's a quote. Oh yeah, so there's Nintendo who supports you, one such response begins. Microsoft who supports you. And then there is Sony who supports its own AAA machine and gives a not safe for work about everyone else. They've reached out to Sony to hear their side, but at the time of this publication, they haven't responded, as well as it's now Sunday, July 4th. Happy Independence Day. They also have still not updated this article with a response. Now, this is not the first time Sony has gotten into trouble for this. If you guys remember last year, Sony started cracking down on violence in anime games and sexuality. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because you want to make sure that you get certain stuff. You know, you don't want to be pushing really terrible stuff. But here's the thing. There was stuff that Sony censored on the PlayStation that Nintendo allowed. Now, Nintendo is, I don't care what Sony says or tries to be, Nintendo is the most family-friendly console you're going to be able to buy. If Nintendo says this is allowed, there is no way Sony should say this is not allowed. Sony does not understand what an indie means. Not at all. For them, indie is something in the lower million budgets. And that's the problem, and that's what this is actually about, my YouTube friends. Sony wants to push their own first-party AAA games. Because at the same time they were cracking down on anime games and violence, they released The Last of Us 2. We're not going to bash The Last of Us 2. It had some really talented people who worked really hard and crafted a very good, not a perfect, but a very good game. But here's the thing, if you don't know about The Last of Us 2, it's extremely dark and violent. So the same stuff that they said was censoring was allowed in The Last of Us 2. And that's a double standard that's just not cool. I understand if you control the hardware, but you shouldn't say you're not allowed to do this. Oh, but we're going to do this. Because that's just, it's not going to help you. No platform is great, but Sony is particularly terrible, says another publisher. They know it too. They've had a problem for a long time, and they've been telling devs they have a problem for a long time. But they've just never fixed anything, so the problem persists. Now, here's why we have two articles up. The issue isn't simply that Sony charges a minimum of $25,000 to be featured in a visible position on the PlayStation Store. It's that is, for most indie games, the only way to be visible. John Walker put in the work, man. Props to you. Another 100+ comments. An independent game studio, Mr. Ian Garner of Neo Doctrine, that's a cool name, unleashed his frustrations trying to publish games on a major console, one he says isn't made by Microsoft. And according to financial figures, it can reach as high as $200K. If you're a little indie developer, you've only got your first 1 to 3 games, your margins are thin. Look, Epic and Steam are great platforms. They take cuts. And I'm not trying to tell you they don't deserve to get paid for making and building the site and the ecosystem that you... But they take cuts. But they don't charge you for that. Sony is saying, hey, you're a small independent studio, just maybe 1 to 5 people? How about you fork over at least $25,000? Can you and I have $25,000 just lying around? I don't have 25. I certainly don't have $200,000. Now, they didn't name Sony or PlayStation, but this follow-up article the next day is letting us know it's Sony. And if Platform X doesn't like your game, no fanfare, no feature, no love. And the article, I will go over this entire article, but the article goes on to say Nintendo is great about this. Not perfect, but great. Because they have so many different search options and functions that you can put your game on Nintendo's platform, and they'll work with you on setting your own sale prices from time to time. But there's so many different categories and ways, and they don't charge you for that your game can be easily featured without you even accidentally meaning for it to happen. Nintendo loves indies. That little Switch is your indie machine now this generation. And it's amazing. But Sony only wants to push its own gaming. And Sony wants to be paid for the privilege. No, let me explain something. It's not a privilege to be on Sony. It's a Sony for these developers to be... It's a privilege for these developers to be on Sony. Let's get that clear and straight. Right now, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm not trying to tell you that Sony is the devil and we need to get the pitchforks out. This is a problem that Sony has had since PlayStation 2. Let's go back in time. I know that's ancient for some of you guys, but let's go back in time for a second. PlayStation 1 came out and it did really well. And it was at the time when PlayStation was originally going to be an add-on device for Nintendo. Shocking if you don't know the history, I know. But Sony said, no, you know what? They couldn't get together, and Sony's like, well, we have the technology and the developers and everything now. We'll just make our own console. PlayStation 2 comes out, and Sony just crushes everything. RPGs, action, new technology, new standards in gaming. It all came out on PlayStation 2, guys. A lot of the stuff that we take for granted in gaming came out in the PS2 era. PS3 came out, and this is where Sony started running into these problems, guys. PlayStation 3 came out, and Sony got the big head that they've had for the last 3 generations. They charged a god-awful price point, which Microsoft came in and undercut them, which is why Xbox is a thing now. They demanded unnecessary standards to their console, and a lot of people just migrated off the platform. They got a lot better during the PS4 cycle, and Xbox got a little bit of a big head. But the problem is that Sony, as soon as they got their fans back, pivoted back to the we're the best and you suck if you don't like us strategy. Was the reason why Xbox has their amazing ecosystem, the reason why Xbox has the best online presence. You cannot argue that. I'm sorry. You pay a monthly fee and you get access to all those games. Xbox, if that's the future of gaming, it's because Microsoft did it. Sony didn't do that. Microsoft made it work. But Sony has had a big head for 3 consoles. Not all of Sony. Just some of the decision makers at the top. There are a ton of talented hardware developers. There are a ton of talented software developers who bust their rears at Sony. But they are hamstrung by stupid corporate policy right now. And I don't understand it. Because you can easily tell this is not consumer friendly. And at this console generation, we have more choice and ability to choose than ever before. So why you would treat your gaming population like this, I don't know. I don't know. We get people every week saying, saw your game on the Xbox dashboard today, a small indie title says. Xbox user interface feels like a mess, but in reality, it's actually kind of interesting that they just have so many different places and spaces to feature games. Meanwhile, on Switch, without paying for features, I went over this, there are spots on the eShop that you will appear without paying. New releases, great deals, all kinds of lists. And they will put new releases and decent discounts into the Discover tab. And then his original thread, which we went over there, about mysterious Platform X. A few other indie developers stepped forward to speak out too, and a theme that emerged was just how few sales they see on PlayStation. The percentage of sales right now is, oh my god, guys, 60% on Switch, 30% on Xbox, 7% on Steam for these guys. PlayStation's 3%. It's not because people on PlayStation don't want to play cool games, it's because PlayStation doesn't want to tell you what games they have. If you've got multiple consoles, a PC and a PlayStation, you have no idea what non-PlayStation games come out on your PlayStation. If you're like me and you've got a Switch and a PlayStation, and an Xbox and Steam, because I'm a huge nerd, what are you going to buy it on? I'm not going to buy it on PlayStation. I'm not even going to know it's out. I'm not going to take the extra time. Oh, I wonder if it's out on PlayStation. I'm going to, oh, this cool game's out on my Switch or Xbox or Steam. Click. Those awesome guys did. Look at this point. I mean, Xbox is also really low. Now, Switch is going to be higher, not because the hardware is so powerful, but because a lot of indie games, they can't make AAA stuff. They can make some really great stuff. They can even make some A-class games. I've seen it. But it's easier to run on Switch, and Switch is portable, and that's amazing. That's amazing. Another publisher who wished to remain anonymous told us the exact sales figures for one small indie release they had named, but asked to withhold. The game sold 20,000 copies on Xbox compared to just a third of that on PlayStation. But when it came to releasing the DLC, Microsoft saw 2,000, while on Sony, and this is not a not safe for work joke, 7. Guys, an adoption rate of your DLC of less than 1% on 2,000 units, 1/3% of the people who bought, they probably didn't even know it came out. They're probably PlayStation mains, and they probably didn't even know the DLC ever came out. And yeah, that's not a huge Even if all 2,000 people bought that, like, what, $5 to $15 DLC? 2,000 times, let's assume just 10, is 20,000 bucks. That's not going to move the market for Sony. That's why they don't care. But it means a lot to small, independent publishers who are just starting their companies to have another $20,000 in sale on your platform. People are just going to stop supporting PlayStation. People are just going to... It's going to be the same problem that Nintendo had for the longest time. It's why they've pivoted so hard. Is that you used to only buy a Nintendo console for the Nintendo first-party release because the architecture was so different. You couldn't really put it on them and everybody else, so you either had to choose. The main reason for these low numbers is not a lack of marketing. Based on conversations, is that the numbers seem to reflect just how hard it is to get games on PlayStation if they're not heavily featured, and how incredibly difficult it is to be featured in PlayStation. If your store doesn't have a place where players can find new, interesting games, and you have literally to use the search functionality to find a game, why the not safe for work is anyone giving them 30%? Here's a deleted tweet. Yep, go try to find my game on PlayStation without typing it in. This was a common refrain from those responding to Garner's original tweet, that the PlayStation just doesn't have a sensible way of letting newly released games prominently appear, while both Xbox and Switch have immediately obvious sections devoted to them. And Christian Botilla publicly tweeted, "Good luck fighting your way through copy-pasted messages that tell you to wait for the invite that will never come." Access to sales is another one. It's the worst, one publisher said. You can only get invited to promotions these days. You cannot set up custom discounts anymore. No publisher developer sales, and the invites are not safe for work. Insane. They propose usually something around 40 to 50% off of your game by default, and you got to make a counter proposal. And you always ask yourself, not safe for work, I have to offer them 30% or they will exclude me maybe. Think about that, man. If you have a $20 game and you already have to give 30% to Sony, and they say, hey, your minimum sale has to be at least 50%. How are you supposed to make money? How are you supposed to make games? Crazily enough, Nintendo finally listened after many years and now provides some of the best tools for devs to actually control the game. We can just drop a discount on Switch for our games whenever we want, and any discount level we want. It's completely in our control. Steam is the only other platform that Microsoft and Nintendo are not... They're not saying... See, things aren't all sunshine on other platforms, but the central message is that there's significant worse. So Microsoft, Steam, and Nintendo, you do have to work with. They're not perfect, and they're never going to be perfect. This is not about, look at how Sony's not perfect and everybody else is. That's not the point of this video, guys. But over and over again, here's your recurring theme. Now try going on the PlayStation Store and finding a specific game. Guys, if Sony doesn't change its ways, it's going to keep getting a lot of hate. Microsoft, Steam, Epic, and Nintendo are getting friendlier and friendlier and better and better. And Sony thinks that because they were the leaders last generation, because their console, I think their console's a little bit more powerful. But guys, it's not more significant than a computer you can buy anymore. It's not more significant than an Xbox console now. And guess what? Nintendo doesn't even try to compete on hardware specs. They innovate in amazing ways. Sony's going to get left behind again. And I don't know why they're comfortable with this. I know that you can't even argue, well, it's because they're a Japanese company and traditionally Japanese don't innovate. Look at what Nintendo's doing and tell me that. This is just, and this is the cow's opinion part of the article, this is just a bunch of 30-plus year industry veterans at the top of Sony, as well as not just at the top of Sony's game division, but the top of Sony corporate itself, who are like, we're the biggest and we're the best, and you gotta play by our rules. And nobody wants to be on Nintendo. Nobody wants to be on Steam. Microsoft's a joke. Who cares? You're going to come here and you're going to give us these discounts and you're going to pay us. Nobody else. Steam. For all the garbage we can give, Steam does not charge you to be on their platform. They take their 30% cut of sales, but they don't charge you tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to be on their platform. If I was an indie developer and I was making a game and I saw this article and then I realized, dude, if I work with Sony, I'm going to have a huge headache. I'm going to have to pay a lot of money. I'm not even going to get good sales from the money I pay. But if I only put it out, and I've seen more and more indie games slowly start to pivot to this. If I put it out on Nintendo and Steam and Microsoft, I'll have 95 to 99% of my sales, and I'll sleep better at night. And people actually know that I'm out. Guys, a cow's opinion today is that Sony needs to change its ways, and we really want Sony to do well. The market is better when there's lots of competition. Look at professional wrestling and how garbage WWE became when they didn't have any competition. Look at anything when there's no competition. The service sucks. It sucks. If you don't have a choice, sometimes they will give you great customer service, but a lot of companies are going to say, well, they don't have a choice. They have to come in here anyway. So it's not even rude sometimes. Just, we're not going to focus on customer service. We're going to focus on profitability because they don't have a choice. Sony is at a time of the biggest amount of choice you as a gamer ever has, is saying, nope, we're just going to do this. And they really need to change their ways. Guys, this is the Cow's Opinions. Happy 4th of July. Love you all. Hope that you're having some nice barbecue. That those of you who are able to can spend time with your families. And as always, play more games because games are awesome. Just, maybe consider buying your next indie game not on Sony because you want the developer to actually make money. Oh, cheap shot. Bye-bye.